Hey folks, Shaun and Ricardo here in Miami for Captivate, Capcom's annual press event. They have a tendency to hold these events in very exotic locations. Last year it was Hawaii, this year it's Miami. You can't go wrong, right?
Nope, it is equally hot and humid here as it was last year.
So the theme for this year's show, if I had to describe it succinctly, something old, something new, because they had some original IP this year, and they've also got their familiar franchises. So why don't we go ahead and start with the new stuff, Dragon's Dogma. What do you think?
Dragon's Dogma is not religious. It's about a dragon, I think.
Yes.
And killing them.
Well, there's dragons and there's other mythical creatures in there as well. This game looks interesting because it's a fantasy game and it's an open world game, so you immediately think Elder Scrolls, but it's not exactly an RPG. This is very much an action game. You're doing some crazy stuff. I set a goblin on fire and then I threw him into a bunch of his goblin buddies. I climbed onto a griffin that was flying in the sky and I stabbed it in the face a bunch of times. It's definitely an action game, so that one looked interesting, but in addition to original IP like that, we're seeing some other familiar franchises, right?
We are. I got to see Super Street Fighter IV Arcade Edition, which is another return to the Super Street Fighter pool for Capcom, and it is now the arcade edition that we know and love that was in arcades coming home. They're really smart this time out. No one's going to hate them that much because it's DLC, which is kind of cool.
Although there is the option where you can buy the retail version, right?
Yeah, they are trying to make sure that they do right by the community. So what they've done is, for people that own the game, there is just a DLC patch that you're going to be able to get in early June. For people that want to get the disc, that maybe they missed Super Street Fighter 4, they can get a disc that has this all on one thing. And for people that maybe want to hold off a little bit, they actually have a patch to ensure compatibility with existing Super Street Fighter 4 players that don't have the full-on arcade upgrade.
Sounds good. Now, that's not the only Street Fighter game that they showed here. There was half of another Street Fighter game, right?
There was, and it was awesome. So we got to play Street Fighter Cross Tekken for the first time. It was really, really cool. They have changed the fighting system yet again, because they've been playing with the Street Fighter stuff a little bit. You know, we saw Capcom kind of definitely change up the fighting stuff that we know from Street Fighter for Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This time, it's another tweak, and they have somehow, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but they've somehow managed to make the Tekken characters and the Street Fighter characters work. They've brought two different fighting game systems together, because Tekken's kind of based on 4 buttons, Street Fighter 6, and the control system actually supports that, and they've changed up a lot of people's moves. Here they actually revealed 10 characters. They had Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Ibel, and Guile. And on the Tekken side, for you fans, there was Kazuya, King, Marduk, Nina, and Bob. And it all worked. There were just basically 3 stages. There was a training stage, which was really plain, but there was kind of an apocalyptic stage that something really bad happened. There was a busted robot and everything, and a Kaboom head. And then they also had what looked to be like a Jurassic Park stage, I think, because there were some dinosaurs in the background, and Alex was there with his boxing glove in the background. So it seems like a really smart and cool mashup of both those franchises that work, so I'm really excited.
And it's a 2-player tag system, so it's sort of finding that comfortable middle ground between Street Fighter and like a game like MVC3, right?
Yep. It's really fast, and you'll be able to swap people in really quickly and continue combos. The crazy thing about it is they showed off the game. They just gave us super high level. Here are the 6 buttons you use. Here's how you use the D-pad. Here's how you throw. Figure out the rest. And so we found all kinds of crazy stuff. There's launchers like MVC3. You can actually charge certain moves and go right into your super, which is completely bizarre because it doesn't cost a meter. And all kinds of like minor technical things like that are really cool.
Now, continuing with that theme of familiar franchises, we also saw Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, which is an interesting game because it is a Resident Evil title, which we have seen plenty of from Capcom, but this is not Capcom developing this game. This is Slant 6, a studio that's well known for working on the SOCOM games, and that DNA is sort of visible in Operation Raccoon City because it's an online, multiplayer, third-person shooter very similar to the SOCOM games. It's interesting because there's a co-op mode and there's a versus mode. In all those modes, there's a class system. So you're actually choosing a type of Umbrella Corporation security officer to play as to just plow down zombies in a hunt, essentially, for Leon Kennedy. So it's interesting because you're playing as the bad guys this time around.
And you got to play as one of the more oddly named bad guys, because usually when you think the Resident Evil series, it's like, what was it? It was Hunk and Chunk and all these other just heavily armored dudes that we've seen in the past. But you got to see the softer side of them, didn't you?
I did. I got to play as a very rotund demolitions expert named Beltway. There's also a lady named Bertha, Vector and Spectre, and maybe there's a guy named Steve in there. I'm not sure exactly. But moving on, there was another Resident Evil game here, correct?
There was, and this one was in 3D and portable. So we got to see the latest edition of Resident Evil, the Mercenaries 3D, because it's on the 3DS. We got to play as one of 6 characters, run around, shoot stuff. It's basically the Mercenaries mode that we know from Resident Evil, but fleshed out considerably. There's a lot of unlockable content and lots of things to kill.
Yeah, and speaking of things to kill, specifically zombies, they also showed Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, which is basically an alternate universe take on Dead Rising 2, where instead of playing as Chuck Green, you're playing as Frank West, the hero from the original Dead Rising title. He was a photojournalist, and obviously the original game had a camera system in it, and that's making its comeback here for Dead Rising 2 Off the Record edition. There's some tweaks, there's some changes, there's a little bit of old, a little bit of new in here, and it seems like a very interesting take on the director's cut format, which is something that Capcom is pretty well known for.
I think for me, this is insane because it seems like they've actually taken someone's fanfic and brought it to life.
A little bit insane, but it looks pretty cool, especially for those who are fans of the character Frank West, because he definitely has a fan base out there. Now, another game that we saw has a giant finger in it, and I don't want to spoil anything else. I'll let Ricardo spoil it.
Right, so at Tokyo Game Show, we saw this big thing called ASURA'S Wrath. We didn't know what the hell was going on. We saw this dude, he was beating stuff up, then an enormous finger came from the sky, and we were like, what is this? And they're like, yay, find out more later. And we just did. So they showed off a new version of the game that put the large finger in the sky in context somewhat. There's demigods, and they're fighting, and there's a dude named Asura, and he's really upset. One would even say pissed off.
It's a little bit like God of War with Asian mythology.
And more arms. Sora has 6 arms. He runs around a lot. He's very expressive, very angry. Doesn't really like the fact that he's mostly human-sized. I mean, he could be like 7 feet, but the demigods, the size of the building, maybe bigger. And then they fight. We got to see him beat one up. And the context for the finger thing, he throws a dude into space. The dude wakes up, gets really mad, gets bigger than the planet, brings his finger down, and surprisingly, Asura does not take that lying down. He punches the finger many times. Okay, he busts like 5 of his arms, but then he uses the last good arm he's got and he just punches him. The dude explodes out in space. There's light and all kinds of stuff, and that's just like a boss fight. And
that's a boss fight at the beginning of the game. It gets crazier, at least according to the developer of that game. I don't know how you top a giant finger space battle. It seems kind of far-fetched.
It's, well, they want it over the top. They got it. I think this is probably, now back me up here, it's the first time we've ever seen a game where somebody got thrown into space and had their finger punched so hard they exploded.
The first, and hopefully not the last. If that's a trend that continues on in 2011, I think we'll all be the better for it. Now, Ricardo, I think that's pretty much all the games that Capcom had here.
It was a nice spread. Surprisingly, a lot of cool stuff and lots of teases for E3. A lot of the stuff that we saw here, they said they're going to show a lot more at E3. Really excited to hear about Street Fighter Cross Tekken because everyone assumed the roster was going to be small, but Ono laid it out and he said there's going to be roster reveals at E3, Gamescom, and Comic-Con, I think.
New York Comic-Con.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a huge roster. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, there you guys have it. A lot more to look forward to at E3, as if you weren't excited enough for that show already. But like I said, that's about it. So, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Shaun and Ricardo here in Miami. Take care, everybody.